The ghost in the attic. I'm 17, and for the last decade I've been a ghost in my own home. My name is Julian. When I was 7, my parents died in a private plane crash. After that, my Uncle Richard and Aunt Clara took me in. They moved into my childhood home, a massive estate in a wealthy Chicago suburb, and quietly moved me out of my bedroom and into the dusty, unfinished attic. My cousin, Bryce, got my room. He got my life. They told the world they were saints for taking in their orphaned nephew. The reality? I was their unpaid staff. I woke up at 5 a.m. every day to shovel snow, clean the pool, and make breakfast before walking 2 miles to the public high school, while Bryce was chauffeured to his elite private academy. If I complained, Uncle Richard would look at me with this dead cold stare and say, "We put a roof over your head, boy. Don't push your luck." I kept my head down. I counted the days until my 18th birthday, October 14th. That was my escape date. I had secretly saved $800 from tutoring kids at school, hiding it inside a loose vent in the attic. I thought I just had to survive a few more months. I was wrong. The nightmare was just shifting gears. It started on a Tuesday. I was clearing out the trash from Uncle Richard's home office, a room I was forbidden to enter unless I was cleaning it. The shredder was jammed. As I pulled the tangled paper out, my eyes caught my own name. It wasn't just a random document. It was a court filing. I pieced the shredded strips together on the floor, my heart hammering against my ribs. Uncle Richard was filing for legal conservatorship over me, claiming I was mentally unfit to live on my own. The court date was set for 2 days before my 18th birthday. He wasn't going to let me leave. He was going to lock me in this life forever. But why? The stolen safe. I sat on the floor of that office, staring at the shredded paper, feeling like all the air had been sucked out of the room. A conservatorship? Why would a man who hated looking at me want to control me for the rest of my life? It didn't make sense unless I was worth something to him. That night I didn't sleep. I waited until 2 a.m., until the house was dead silent, and the only sound was the hum of the central heating. I crept back downstairs to the office. Uncle Richard had a floor safe hidden behind a mahogany bookshelf. I'd watched him open it once, years ago, through a crack in the door. The combination was Bryce's birthday. Typical. My hands shook as I spun the cold metal dial. 12, 04, 02. Click. The heavy door swung open. Inside were stacks of cash, passports, and a thick blue folder with the logo Harrison and Vance Law. I pulled it out and opened it. The first page was a trust document. My parents' names were at the top. As I read the legal jargon, the world tilted on its axis. My parents hadn't left me with nothing. They had left me an empire, a multi-million-dollar tech manufacturing company, real estate, and a massive trust fund. But there was a catch. The assets were locked under a guardianship clause. Uncle Richard was named the executor until I turned 18. If I turned 18 of sound mind, everything transferred to me. If I was deemed unfit, he retained permanent control. For 10 years, he had been living off my parents' money. The cars, the private schools, the designer clothes. It was all mine. At the bottom of the safe, I found something else. A small, heavy brass key with the number 402 stamped on it, and a business card for a man named Arthur Vance, attorney at law. I took the key, the card, and my $800 from the attic, and I walked out the back door into the freezing Chicago night. I wasn't going to be a victim anymore. The lawyer and the legacy. I slept in a 24-hour diner, nursing a single cup of coffee until the sun came up. At 8:30 a.m., I stood outside the towering glass skyscraper in downtown Chicago that housed Harrison and Vance Law. I was wearing my only decent clothes, a faded sweater and jeans, looking entirely out of place among the suits. When I reached the reception, I asked for Arthur Vance. The receptionist eyed me up and down. "Do you have an appointment?" she asked coldly. I placed the brass key and the old business card on her marble desk. "Tell him Julian Sterling is here." 3 minutes later, a man in his 60s, with sharp eyes and a silver beard, practically sprinted into the lobby. He looked at me, and his eyes watered. "You look exactly like your father," he whispered. He pulled me into his office and locked the door. Arthur had been my father's best friend and personal lawyer. "Julian, I've been trying to contact you for 5 years," Arthur said, pacing the room. "Your Uncle Richard changed your phone numbers, blocked my letters, and threatened me with harassment charges if I came near the house. He told me you were deeply troubled and in a private facility." I laughed, a bitter, dry sound. "I was living in his attic, Arthur, cleaning his toilets." Arthur's face went white, then furious. "That bastard," he hissed. Then he sat down, looking me dead in the eye. "Your 18th birthday is in exactly 1 week. Richard has filed a petition to declare you incompetent. But there's something worse. He's trying to sell your father's company, Sterling Tech, to a rival firm for $50 million. The signing is scheduled to happen at the annual corporate gala this Friday night. If he signs those papers before you turn 18, it will be tied up in litigation for decades. We have to stop him." I looked at the brass key in my hand. "Then let's go to war." The brass key. Arthur took me to a secure underground vault at a private bank in the city. The brass key I had stolen from Uncle Richard's safe opened a safety deposit box that my mother had set up before she died. When Arthur pulled the long metal drawer out, my breath caught in my throat. Inside was a letter in my mother's handwriting. "To our brave Julian. If you are reading this, we are gone. Never let anyone dim your light. The company is yours. The legacy is yours. Trust Arthur." Underneath the letter were the original untampered founding documents of Sterling Tech, proving my father owned 100% of the voting shares, which were to transfer directly to me. But the most important piece of paper was a signed affidavit from my parents, specifically stating that under no circumstances was Richard ever allowed to sell the company. "Richard forged the board's approval," Arthur explained, looking over the documents. "He's using the gala as a smokescreen to look legitimate in front of the buyers. He's throwing a massive party with the city's elite to sign the merger publicly. It's an ego trip." "So, how do we stop him?" I asked, my voice steady. Arthur smiled, but it was a dangerous smile. "We don't just stop him, Julian. We expose him. If we file an injunction quietly, he might find a way to squirrel the money away or drag it out in court. But if we do it in front of the buyers, the board of directors, and the press, he's finished." I spent the next 3 days living in a luxury hotel, paid for by Arthur, preparing. I got a haircut. Arthur brought in a tailor who fitted me for a midnight blue tuxedo that cost more than my uncle had spent on me in 10 years. When I looked in the mirror, the tired, beaten-down boy from the attic was gone. I looked like a CEO. I looked like my father. The night of the gala, Friday night, the grand ballroom of the Drake Hotel. There were over 400 people there, politicians, tech CEOs, and the press. I sat in the back of a black SUV with Arthur across the street, watching the guests arrive. My heart was beating so fast I thought it might crack my ribs. I saw Uncle Richard step out of a limousine, wearing a custom tux, smiling for the cameras like he owned the city. Aunt Clara was dripping in diamonds, my mother's diamonds. And Bryce, my cousin, was walking behind them, looking smug. "Are you ready?" Arthur asked, handing me a thick leather-bound folder containing the original documents and a newly drafted emergency court order. "I've been ready since I was 7, I said. We bypassed the red carpet and went in through the VIP entrance. Arthur knew the security head, who owed him a favor. As we stood in the shadows near the back of the ballroom, I watched my uncle take the stage. The room quieted down. "Ladies and gentlemen," Richard's voice boomed through the speakers, dripping with fake humility. "10 years ago, my brother left me with a massive responsibility. Sterling Tech. It hasn't been easy, but tonight, we take a historic step. We are merging with Apex Innovations to bring this company into the future." The crowd clapped politely. At the front table, the CEO of Apex sat with a pen ready, a massive contract laid out in front of him. And so, Richard continued, pulling a gold pen from his pocket, it is my absolute honour to sign this agreement and secure my brother's legacy. He leaned over the table. The cameras flashed. I stepped out of the shadows. I wouldn't sign that if I were you, Richard, I said. My voice wasn't shouting, but through the microphone Arthur had slipped me, it echoed like thunder across the silent ballroom. The ghost speaks. 400 heads turned simultaneously. The cameras pivoted. Uncle Richard froze, the gold pen hovering an inch above the contract. He squinted into the spotlight, trying to see who had interrupted his perfect moment. When I walked down the centre aisle, the colour completely drained from his face. He looked like he had seen a ghost. Aunt Clara gasped so loudly it was picked up by the nearby mics, and Bryce actually dropped his champagne glass. It shattered on the marble floor.
"Julian," Richard croaked, his voice cracking. "What are you doing here? Security! Get this disturbed boy out of here." 2 massive security guards stepped toward me, but Arthur Vance walked right past me, holding up a badge and a stack of papers. "Stand down," Arthur commanded with the authority of a judge. "I am Arthur Vance, lead counsel for the Sterling estate, and this young man is Julian Sterling, the sole heir and majority shareholder of Sterling Tech." The room erupted into frantic whispers. The CEO of Apex Innovations stood up, looking furious and confused. "Richard, what is the meaning of this? You said the kid was in a mental institution." I walked right up to the stage, looking up at the man who had made my life a living hell. "No," I said clearly, staring right into Richard's panicked eyes. "He put me in the attic. For 10 years he used me as a maid while he stole my parents' money. And yesterday he tried to file a fraudulent conservatorship to keep me locked away forever." I turned to the crowd, addressing the buyers. "The man standing on that stage has zero authority to sell this company. He forged the board documents. He is a fraud, and as of an hour ago, he is under criminal investigation for embezzlement." Richard's face turned purple with rage. He lunged for the microphone. "He's lying. He's a sick, delusional kid." The Empire reclaimed. Before Richard could say another word, Arthur handed a thick folder to the CEO of Apex. "Here are the original founding documents, the trust terms, and an emergency injunction signed by a federal judge this afternoon, freezing all of Richard Sterling's assets and halting this sale." The Apex CEO flipped through the pages. His face hardened. He looked up at Richard with absolute disgust. "You lied to us, Richard. The deal is dead, and my lawyers will be contacting you for fraud." The CEO threw the contract onto the stage and walked out of the ballroom. His entire team followed. The press was going wild, cameras flashing like strobe lights. Richard stumbled back, grasping the podium. He looked at Aunt Clara, who was desperately trying to hide her face from the cameras. Bryce was shrinking into his chair, realizing his trust fund and luxury life had just vanished. "You ungrateful brat," Richard hissed at me, his mask completely off. "I fed you. I housed you." I walked up the steps onto the stage. I didn't flinch. "You stole from a grieving child," I said, my voice cold and steady. "You took my home, you took my parents' company, and you tried to take my future. You're done, Richard. You have 24 hours to vacate my house." I didn't yell. I didn't need to. The silence in the room was absolute. I looked at the crowd, the board of directors, and the press. "My name is Julian Sterling," I announced, "and my father's company is no longer for sale." The ballroom erupted. Some people were clapping, others were furiously typing on their phones. Richard was escorted off the stage by his own security team, hiding his face from the flashing cameras. For the first time in a decade, I took a deep breath, and the air tasted like freedom. The sunrise, the fallout was spectacular. The news broke the next morning, dominating every financial and local network. The boy in the attic takes back his empire. Uncle Richard was arrested 3 days later. A forensic audit revealed he had embezzled over $7 million from the company to fund his lavish lifestyle.
He's currently facing up to 15 years in federal prison. Aunt Clara and Bryce were forced to move into a tiny 2-bedroom apartment. Bryce had to drop out of his elite private school and get a job bagging groceries to help pay their legal fees. I didn't feel sorry for them. They were finally living the life they had forced on me. As for me, the day after the gala, I walked back into the estate. It was empty and quiet. I didn't go back to the attic. I walked into the master suite, the room that had belonged to my parents, and I opened the windows to let the fresh air in. Arthur Vance stepped in as acting CEO to manage the company until I finish college, but I sit in on every board meeting. I'm learning the ropes. I'm learning how to be the man my parents knew I could be. Sometimes, I wake up early, right around 5 a.m. For a split second, my body tenses, expecting to hear Richard shouting for his breakfast. But then I feel the high thread count sheets, look out the window at the sprawling lawn that belongs to me, and I smile. They thought they could bury me in the dark. But they forgot that I was a seed. And now, I'm the one casting the shadow. If you're out there, feeling trapped, feeling like you're invisible and surrounded by people who use you, don't give up. Your time is coming. Keep your head down, plan your escape, and when the moment is right, take back your life. Thank you for watching my story. If this resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe. It helps more than you know. See you in the next one.